Hello YouTube. Today I'm going to do a different style of video. I'm not really sure what to call it yet. I think it's probably like halfway between a vlog and a how-to because I'm going to do something that probably most of you will never have to do. So I'm not going to turn it into a how-to like you need to do this, you need to do this, you need to do that because it's probably never going to happen. I'm just going to record it so that just if you do for some strange reason need to repaint and resurface a metal object, maybe my video can be helpful. But if you're looking for in-depth detail, it's probably not the video for you. So, what I'm going to be doing today is work on this. This may look like a small throwing knife. I just called it a throwing knife until recently. I found out that this is actually called a spade. Not entirely sure why. It's basically a mini throwing knife. Anyways, I noticed a while ago, I hadn't done anything with it for a bit, but I noticed a while ago that it was starting to have like some rust spots on it, and the paint has been coming off since I found it. But that wasn't a big deal until I noticed the rust. So what I'm going to do today is, like I said, repaint it. What I'm going to do is start by taking the paint off with some sandpaper and then hitting it with some steel wool. After that I will paint it and you can see the finished product. So, let's get started. Okay, so the first thing, like I said, I'm going to sand off the paint, and this is 220 sandpaper that I have here. I'm going to pay very close attention to these curves and crevices right there where the handle meets the blade, and also I'm going to see if I can't fold the paper over and get inside of that eyelet right there. And I'll show you what it's like when I'm done. Quick side note, as I'm sanding this thing, I'm being very careful that I sand along the length of the knife as much as I can so that the grooves that the sandpaper is putting into the metal is actually with the overall flow of the knife so it'll look better. Okay, so having done that, I'm going to be very careful not to touch anything so that I don't die, because believe me, if this got on stuff, I would die. But as I was saying, being very careful not to touch anything, I'm going to first throw the paper and the sandpaper away and wash my hands off very thoroughly. Okay, after having washed my hands and got a fresh piece of paper, I then went and grabbed cotton balls, 3-in-1 oil, that stuff's the best, of course the little spade, and some steel wool. What I'm using, I believe, is quadruple aught. There's just 4 zeros. The way steel wool works is the more zeros, the finer it is. Just as a heads up. Okay, so I'm going to start off with the 3-in-1 oil because it says it lubricates. Not so worried about that. Cleans, great. Cleaning is good. And prevents rust. That's the key. Just going to put a little bit on one side of the knife here, not much. And then take a cotton ball, and I'm going to just rub the oil in, and I'm hoping that this will help clean off any leftover paint, and it will, of course, prevent rust and what have you. Then after I do that, I'm going to do the same on the other side, and I'm also going to pay special attention to the edge of the handle to make sure that that doesn't get missed. And you can kind of see here what I was talking about with rust. There we go. See, there's a little bit in that divot there, and also I believe that's a little bit of rust, not at the base of the blade, but just under it in these indentions here. I believe that to be rust, and I couldn't get it off with the sandpaper, but I did try my very best. So after I've wiped this little spade down thoroughly with the oily cotton ball, I am going to wipe it off even more thoroughly with a clean one, because you don't want oil left behind. This was just to sort of clean off any rust and paint and other stuff. If the oil's left behind, the paint that I'm going to apply will not adhere. Okay, so after I've done that, see here, it's looking pretty good. Then I'm going to hit it with the steel wool. And this, I'm not super worried about. It doesn't have to, it's not like really taking off any metal. I mean, it is, but that's not primarily why I'm doing this. The reason I'm doing this more than anything is just to scratch up the metal so that the paint will take. It will be able to get down in the very small scratches that are made by the steel. So I'm going to be very careful to cover every little bit of this knife. Okay, so now hit it with the steel wool, and pretty much I'm ready to paint it. The only thing I have to do now is just pick out my paint. And since it's a knife, I'm thinking I probably don't want to go glossy, just because I don't really like the idea of glossy paint on a knife. Most knives have like a matte or a satin finish, so I think I'm going to go satin, and I just happen to have some satin enamel. Enamel is a very hard, very tough paint. I read it and it said that it was good for metal, so I'm hoping that is actually the case. But before I actually paint this, there is one more thing that I'm going to do just to make sure that the metal is actually as clean as I can get it. Okay, so before I do this next step, I went ahead and made sure that I have everything I'm going to need for the painting. I have the paint, I have rubbing alcohol, and we'll get to that in a minute. 2 latex gloves. Again, we'll get to that in a minute. You could also use rubber. I just grabbed these because they were handy, and they're going to be less likely to have something on them that could either damage the metal or cause the paint to not adhere properly. And some of those cotton balls that we had earlier. Also, I have painter's tape. I probably could have used masking tape, but actually this was easier to find. And I have some very thin nylon string. My plan with this is to put it through the eyelet here and suspend the knife, and that'll make it easier to paint and less likely to have spots that aren't covered properly. So now, what I'm going to do, obviously put the gloves on. The reason I'm doing this is so that none of my skin oil will get onto the knife and, again, prevent the paint from adhering. I'm going to keep these on until my knife is securely suspended and ready to be painted. Okay, so now I'm going to take one of these cotton balls, put some rubbing alcohol on it, not a whole bunch, and carefully wipe off this knife. Once again, get into all the places that there could be oil, or, I mean, there's obviously some paint left over, but I couldn't help that. Just go back over it a couple times, make sure everything is as oil-free as I can possibly get it. And then I'm going to take a clean dry cotton ball and just wipe that off. Rubbing alcohol will evaporate really pretty quickly, and I could have lit it on fire to get it to evaporate, but then I'd be holding onto a knife coated in rubbing alcohol, which was burning, so I don't know about that one. Maybe I'll do that in a future video. Okay, so now I'm ready to tape it up. My plan is just to have some tape along the very edge of the blade here and slant with the curve of the blade. So everything except the very edge of the blade on both sides is going to be covered theoretically. We'll see how that goes. Okay guys, so I am at this point 74% sure that masking is not my strong point. I mean, I've got straight edges on kind of a rounded blade there, but we'll see how it goes. Okay, so like I said, I'm now going to put this piece of nylon string through the eyelet, take it outside, hang it up, and paint it. Okay, so there are a few things to tell you about how the whole thing with the paint just went. So I'm going to talk to you now while I'm waiting on it to dry. First thing is enamel paint. Generally, when you're using an aerosol can, it covers well, and enamel paint always covers heavily. And I read on the can, this paint will take 5 to 9 hours to dry. So with those two facts in mind, that enamel paint covers well and that it's going to take it 5 to 9 hours to dry, I decided just to go ahead and finish it up, the whole job, with just one coat. But I also kept in mind that I had to be very careful about that, because when you're trying to cover something in one coat, you can have a tendency to get runs and drips, which this wouldn't have been a problem with this particular paint job, except for the fact that this can of enamel paint that I had malfunctioned. It didn't want to spray hardly like at all. So then I finally got it to spray, and then it was like very intermittent and spotty, and it kind of goofed up the paint job, and enamel paint is very gooey. So I'm thinking the paint job may not turn out as well as I'd hoped, but it's not because of the paint I was using or the way I applied it or even me. If I was to do this again with a good can of paint that was actually going to spray correctly, there would have been no problems whatsoever. Also, I'm really liking the way this satin black is looking. I think it's going to be really cool. But like I said, gotta wait. The can actually said 2 to 4 hours dry to the touch. 5 to 9 is dry to handling or something like that. I think it basically means if you're like painting something that you're going to be like moving around and using, it's going to be stable, if you will. 5 to 9 hours. And then after that it said fully set up 24 hours. So since this is a throwing knife, I'm thinking I'll probably just like give it 24 hours no matter what. But in 5 to 9 hours I'll probably be able to like bring it in off the string and just have it in the house somewhere to finish drying the rest of the way. So there is some extra information. Now we just gotta wait a long time. Okay guys, it's the moment you've all been waiting for. Or, I guess the moment I've been waiting for. I don't know, I hope you've been waiting for it. Anyways, there it is. The finished product. And I gotta say, I'm actually really happy with this. The black turned out a little bit shinier than I thought it might, but I think that's because the paint globbed up due to the malfunctioning spray can. You can see on the handle there's a little bit of buildup. But other than that, it looks really good. It covered inside of that eyelet really nicely, all the way around. And as you can see, masking is definitely not my strong point. But you know what? I don't really care. This is sweet. I'm very happy with how this turned out. Okay, but that's enough of me talking. Cue the before and after slides. Okay, so there you have it, guys. I hope you've enjoyed my video, and I hope you found my project interesting. Don't forget to check out my channel just in case there are any other videos of mine that you might be interested in.